The virtue of political extremism is that once you get people all torn up and upset, steam coming out of their ears, they will show up and vote. Will you care as much as they do and show up and vote?
As Bill Clinton last Sunday rallying the troops for his longtime friend Terry McAuliffe, who appears to be on track to be elected governor of Virginia 3 days from now. Ken Cuccinelli, McAuliffe's Tea Party opponent, has energized the far right, but has turned off women, independents, and swing voters in the process. And for the first time in 40 years, Virginians are poised to elect a governor from the same party as the president. Equally stunning, Democrats could sweep all three offices on the ballot in Virginia on Tuesday, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, to add to the 2 U.S. Senate seats they already control. If that happens, it'll mark the first time since 1969, the dying days of the Jim Crow South, when segregationists led the Democratic Party. The Democrats have held all 5 of those offices at once. And how are Virginia Democrats making all of this party history? With an uninspiring candidate at the top of their ticket. Columnist Jonathan Chait described McAuliffe earlier this year as, quote, the Democrats have been dying to vote against. He's the consummate Washington insider, a millionaire bundler who was crushed in the 2009 Democratic primary. Former Congressman Tom Davis, a Republican, expressed his exasperation with his party in an interview with National Journal this week. He said, this should have been a slam dunk. Virginia almost always votes against the president's party. All we needed was a mammal up there. Well, fortunately, we happen to have former Congressman Tom Davis and noted mammal at the table with us today. So, Congressman, just can you tell us what has happened to your party and how is your party in Virginia interpreting and processing what it is seeing play out?
Well, first of all, we've gone to a convention nominating process, which is a very exclusionary process.
No primary, a convention.
Right, and it brings out the most conservative candidates, so you have a very conservative ticket. But what's happened to Republicans is they've become the issue. Traditionally, in midterm elections, it's the president's party, and Virginia tends to be a contrary state on that, sends a message to Washington. It appears this election is all about the Republican candidate who's upside down. His negatives far higher than positive.
Well, so we can just illustrate that a little bit. First of all, look at the gender gap that exists. I have not seen a race where it's this stark. I mean, this is among men. Cuccinelli, this is the Washington Post poll, 45-44 among men. Cuccinelli up a point, actually. Among women, a 24-point lead for Terry McAuliffe among women. And here's a quote. This is one of the interviews from that poll that sort of illustrates where that's coming from. Here's a woman, a 64-year-old female voter from Virginia, saying, I am not a fan of Terry McAuliffe. I think he's kind of a lightweight. I would have preferred a stronger candidate. But if he's the only Democrat, he gets my vote. The devil himself would be better on women's issues than Ken Cuccinelli. Tom, I guess what I'm wondering, though, is this to me seems like, in Virginia, the ultimate test of what the Tea Party can do to the Republican Party in a general election in a swing state. Virginia is the ultimate swing state. Terry McAuliffe's a very weak Democratic candidate. This is an off-year election, so the turnout model should favor the Republicans. All these conditions exist that should make this, a winnable race for Republicans. Like you say, the fact that Cuccinelli is going to lose this, and maybe the whole ticket's going to lose this, is there any sign, are you hearing any sign from the Republicans of rethinking their strategy, rethinking that convention, and more broadly rethinking the leaning on the Tea Party?
Well, I think that, look, the party's become estranged from the business base at this point. You have the Republican lieutenant governor not endorsing Cuccinelli. A number of high-profile Republicans are not supporting the ticket at this point. So there's a lot of rethinking. But remember, the party is controlled by the nomination process, which happens to be convention at this point. They have a very conservative central committee. So for all of this, I think it's going to take a few years to sort out. This is not going to sort out overnight. And look, the election's not over. You've had about 5 polls in the last week with different turnout models. This is really all about turnout. The real question is what's going to happen in the legislature. Do Republicans lose an appreciable number of seats? They'll hold it. But look, these are different models. Chris Christie in New Jersey winning in a blue state. Virginia appears to be in peril. So it says something about the future of the party.
Republicans in Virginia are very slow learners. A few years ago, they didn't want Tom Davis to be their candidate for the United States Senate. And so they refused to have a primary, which Tom probably would have won, and they had the convention and produced a candidate who couldn't win. So what do? A few years later, they do exactly the same thing. The elephant never forgets, but the elephant doesn't learn anything. I mean, the problem is, and the other thing is that McAuliffe and Tom and I have a little difference on this. McAuliffe has run a masterful campaign. He absolutely hammered early on Cuccinelli on women's issues, particularly in the Washington, D.C., suburban Northern Virginia market. Never let him up off the mat, never let him get any footing. He has run a textbook campaign.
Well, and I got to pick up on that point, because that's the other thing that's interesting to me here, Dave, is that we think of Virginia traditionally. How do you win Virginia as a Democrat? You got to assuage the sort of conservative, rural voters in the state, guns, and then maybe cultural issues and that sort of thing. And the Terry McAuliffe campaign really speaks to sort of this theme coming out of the 2012 election we heard about how the electorate in Virginia and nationally is changing, and it's a lot more liberal on cultural issues now. And Terry McAuliffe has come at it and not said, "Hey, don't worry, I'm not too liberal. It's this guy's too conservative," and that seems to be resonating here.
Well, he has an F rating from the NRA, and Republicans are really optimistic about what that could do to him, forgetting, I think, that Barack Obama and Tim Kaine had F ratings from the NRA, and they won the state. Ken Cuccinelli, I saw in North Virginia on Monday, and part of his speech was about coal and the war on coal. Who in Northern Virginia cares about the war on coal? Or thinks if they thinks there's a war on coal, does not prefer clean energy to coal? If you look at where the vote is shifting, it's fun to compare a map. Fun, I can't believe I use that word, but you know where I'm coming from.
I think it's fun.
Fun to compare a map, too, of how Democrats, when they would lose Virginia, 20 years ago, they would take Southwest Virginia. They now win the state and get blown away there. It doesn't matter because people don't live there like they're moving into Northern Virginia. And I want to add on the convention thing, in case it doesn't come up, that convention process produced probably the worst candidate in North America this year, E.W. Jackson, who just gave a good speech, won the nomination, then all his problems were
Lieutenant Governor. Right.
Yeah, so I don't know. They have to learn something from that. There's always a tendency to spin. They'll probably try to blame the Libertarian for spoiling the vote.
I've heard that one.
But,
and the ties to the Johnny, the businessman and the scandal with Governor McDonnell. Yeah. But in the Republican convention in Virginia, of course, also gave us Oliver North 20 years ago. Yeah. There's a tradition there. But there's also another race on Tuesday I want to get up, because I think this has become, these names probably won't mean anything to folks out there, but in Alabama, there is a special election, the Republican primary, and a special election in a very Republican district to replace a member of Congress who just left. So these are the two candidates, Dean Young and Bradley Byrne. You see them up on the screen. Now, why does this mean something to you? Because this is the first test after the shutdown of sort of the Republican establishment versus the Tea Party wing. Bradley Byrne, a former Democrat, like a lot of former Democrats in Alabama, sort of involved in the Republican Party, sort of the establishment candidate in Dean Young, the unabashed Tea Party candidate. And there are national sort of Republican groups that have, from both sides, that have sort of poured into this race now in the last week. And this is really a test, Governor Whitman, I think, of where if anything has changed in your party nationally, and especially among the base of the party in the wake of the shutdown and the disaster that was for Republicans.
Well, I think as you define the base today, it probably hasn't changed much, because the base, we're looking at a very small plurality of people. I mean, it's all going to come down to turnout. The average voter turnout in primaries in this country is 10%. So by definition, you leave it to the most partisan, who tend to be people who have single issues, and they tend to be far left or far right. And that's really what's the base problem here, is trying to get people to understand to vote. And you've got to start voting in primaries. You've got to vote in these elections. But right now, there's so many Republicans that the fastest growing demographic on registration is the independent. Not Republican, not Democrat. Both parties are losing. Republicans are losing more than Democrats, but it's happening to the Democrats because people are saying a pox on both your houses. I suspect in this kind of a race, the most energized people will be the Tea Party people.
And if that happens, that would reinforce
the Republican base in the South is the crazy right. I mean, this is a southern state. Of course the Tea Party candidate's going to run strong. That's their base in those states. Now, in other states, you can argue that the establishment might be able to really mount a campaign against a Tea Party candidate. It's awfully hard in a southern state.
Well, so this is one to watch on Tuesday. We're going to have Virginia, we're going to have New Jersey, you'll hear New York City, but this is one to watch. Tom, quickly.
Look, it is an urban district. It's a southern district, but it's an urban district, so this is a good test. Bonner was a more moderate establishment candidate before him, Sonny Callahan before him, Jack Edwards. But look, it's in the South. So it gives the Tea Party group some advantage.
But just folks, keep an eye on this one Tuesday night, because this is a very good test about where the Republican Party is post-shutdown. Anyway, a Ken Cuccinelli campaign event is also causing problems for another Republican in another state who has designs on national office. We will tell you who that is after this.